Let's talk about Sonic Omens, a subject many can agree, for better or for worse, is an interesting one to delve into. Previously titled Sonic 2020 and developed by the formerly named Mania team, this fan game took the community by storm, and rightfully so. There exists a wide world of creative and immensely talented fan projects for Sonic the Hedgehog, but arguably none of them could quite match the sheer amount of promise that Sonic 2020 had in store. Its scope, its visuals, everyone agreed it looked fantastic. Sadly though, like most things in this community, it didn't stay sunshine and rainbows for very long. As the game ventured further in development, accessible betas rolled out and the title changed to the current Sonic Omens, with the dev team now going by Ouroboros Studio. And many people began to see this project in a more negative light. First of all, opinions of the game itself ranged from slightly underwhelming to downright unplayable, with some even claiming it played like garbage. And secondly, the thing that really killed the project, its endless onslaught of controversies. The drama of the behind the scenes of this game remained the #1 discussion within the Sonic community, and as word of mouth spread, one by one, more and more people turned on Omens and effectively disowned it, with many big Sonic tubers even going as far as to avoid playing it. It got so bad that even though I knew absolutely nothing about this game back in 2021, it was made abundantly clear that Omens was to be stayed away from. For the longest time, it was just common knowledge that the game was awful and the devs were horrible people. At least that's what I was led to believe at first. But everything changed once I finally got my hands on a gaming laptop several years ago, and curiosity got the better of me. What was really the deal with Omens? I heard everyone's general consensus, but what's the actual full story? Well, I sat down, watched the Sonic Show's video on the matter, and looked into the situation more. Most importantly of all, I sat down and actually experienced all of what Sonic Omens had to offer. I beat the main story, got every S rank, and collected all 65 red rings. And wow. Honestly, I'm speechless. Sonic Omens is one of the best Sonic games I've ever played. How's that for a dramatic hook to draw your attention? Honestly, I think all that achieved was getting some instant dislikes, but I'll take that chance. Because yes, while it's not objectively flawless, and it is a fan-made project crafted with obvious limitations, Sonic Omens is everything I want from a Sonic game compiled into one singular experience. And I'm head over heels for it. As for the drama, I won't address it right away because there's a lot I want to say on that front, but some of you may be aware that even if something is good, I won't support it over any circumstances if the creators are awful people and or have done awful things. So just know that I wouldn't be here risking my legitimacy as a creator if I didn't genuinely believe that all the behind the scenes issues people are pissed about are all blown way out of proportion, with loads of misinformation I'll delve into later. I was hesitant to make this video because I know how vicious the Sonic community can be, especially regarding the mere mention of this game. The Sonic Show's video that I mentioned earlier got torn apart by the community, and his is one of the only videos defending this game that exists on the platform. Don't get me wrong, there is a side to the Sonic community that I love, and sometimes it can be a positive fandom. But like most fandoms, a good portion of it are tweet first and ask questions later, and because of that, there barely exists any room for nuanced conversations and free thinking. So there's a good chance anything I have to say that wavers from the norm will be immediately dismissed. If you clicked on this video out of curiosity and you have a burning hatred for Omens, all I ask you to do is to listen to what I have to say with an open mind. If that doesn't work, well, feel free to click off, because this is my review and my opinion. With that said, let me take on the daunting task of accurately expressing my clear, very much biased thoughts on Sonic Omens. The first thing we're going to tackle is the visuals, and I don't need to say much. I mean, have you looked at the screen? Even with YouTube compression and barely adequate recording equipment, you can tell that this game has no right looking as good as it does for a fan-made project. Not only are all the 3D renders and textures so crystal clear and well made, but there is a stunning amount of color here. Very reminiscent of the type of art style you'd think of when Adventure 2 or Unleashed comes to mind. This game is really pretty to look at, and by extension, the well-crafted environments of each stage. Whether it be the tropical Chao paradise, a dark and high-tech gun facility, or the stormy white jungle, everything looks so good to the point where there's no clear distinction between the graphical fidelity of Omens and that of an 8th generation official release. Ouroboros really took the unique art style the games are known for and applied it seamlessly here. While we're still in visuals, holy cow these cutscenes. Yes, this fan-made game has fully animated and voice 3D cutscenes that look stunning. The lighting is on point and used very effectively. The models have a surprising amount of expression and move around a lot. There's high-scale action, just look at them. No, seriously, look at them. However, one thing that many, including myself, saw as a huge con that undermines the cutscenes is the voice acting. If you would have asked my thoughts on the voice work for this game back when I first beat it, I would have told you that for the most part it was pretty bad. But not due to the fault of certain performances, but for the fact that some of these voices sound absolutely nothing like the characters do in-game, with Eggman being the main example of this. The person who voices Sonic does a Jason Griffin impression, and with the story's ties to Sonic X that I'll delve into later, it's reasonable to assume the devs wanted 4 kids sound-alikes. And with that in mind, a lot of these performances sound bizarrely inaccurate aside from Sonic and maybe Shadow, and I was left wondering why a game of such big production quality couldn't find more accurate impressionists. And then it hit me. Wait a minute, aren't these devs Russian? Then I went on YouTube to hear the Russian dub of Sonic X and Unleashed, which are the game's Omens draws direct parallels from, and yeah, mystery solved.
Кстати, об этом! Я знаю того, кто может знать что-то о происходящем в последнее время.
Sensors picked up strange activity at an abandoned Eggman outpost not far from here.
Извини! Серьезно, извини! Пожалуйста, прости меня! Я больше не буду злодействовать! Обещаю!
Yeah, only I am allowed to take over this planet. And I'm not going to let some third-rate villain take that away from me.
То есть, ты сейчас в своем истинном обличии, Соник?
I will always protect you.
I had a whole segment planned where I would go into why these voices don't sound too good and are pretty unnatural, but no, these are just simply how the Russian voices of the characters sound, which makes sense because most of the voice cast is Russian. Most except for, you guessed it, the voice of Sonic, who bases his performance off of Jason's, and Amy, who sounds like Amy normally does here in the US. All it really took was putting 2 and 2 together to figure out why the voice acting in Omens was quote unquote bad, when in reality, we just weren't used to hearing these voices for the characters. The only performance I can't fully take seriously is Shadow's, and that's because his Russian accent is so incredibly strong, it's a little funny.
This time, the doctor has bitten off more than he can chew. He's even managed to get to Julian's bedside.
But for the most part, the cast did a decent job. The voice acting can definitely be shoddy in some places, but it's not too distracting. For the most part. As for the game's performance, in the year 2026, it runs pretty well and is well optimized enough to run at max settings on my HP Victus 15.6. And finally, one last thing to close out this game's immaculate presentation, the soundtrack. Composed by John Rise, a lot of the music you hear in this review is from this game's official soundtrack composed by him, and my god, what an artist. Omens OST, like everything else, mirrors what you would hear in an official release, and there are so many tracks in here that are outright addicting to listen to. The final boss has a fully composed vocal song titled The Weight of the World that brings back Bentley Jones, who's known for their performance in Dreams of Absolution from 06, and guys, I can't stop listening to it. Chances are I'm listening to it as I edit this video, it's seriously a banger. Omens looks great, sounds great, performs well, and all that is a win. But now for the real and most important question. Does it play well? That question is definitely a loaded one, so I'll simply try my best to answer it. The objective of Omens is to try and bridge the gap between the 2000s era of Sonic with the Boost era, and that's made expressly clear story-wise. But surprisingly enough, that's also the case gameplay-wise. You see, while the controls and level design of Omens screams games like Adventure 1 and 2, Heroes, and 06, the game does something crazy and implements a boost along with it. This spells disaster. Taking the general freedom of older 3D titles and combining that with the boost formula that relied on linearity and a heavier focus on reaction time sounds like it would not work. And yet, the devs pulled it off. Omens successfully combines the positive attributes of both eras into a seamless experience. What really turns people off from the boost game is the boost is basically your run button. There's no sense of natural speed and the levels more often play themselves. Omens fixes that by having the boost simply serve as a rewarding enhancement. By collecting rings and filling your boost gauge, you gain the ability to greatly accelerate your speed and take specific shortcuts, but it doesn't come at the cost of removing any amount of control over Sonic. What allows for this to even be possible is the general openness of each stage. The level design for this game is absolutely flawless. There is no shortage of shortcuts and alternate paths in these stages, and they're big enough to encourage exploration as well as make boosting feel a lot more natural and controllable. But they're also linear enough to successfully emulate the high octane speed the series is known for, as well as not risk the player getting lost or confused about where to go. Tree Palace is the only exception to this. If you're wondering what abilities Sonic has, most of what you'd expect is present. There's the homing attack, which is super responsive, smooth, and thankfully has a lock-on indicator. There's the light speed dash, which works the same as it does in Adventure 2 and onward. It can very well come in handy, and surprisingly Sonic has a spin dash. A returning move that's done justice is the light speed attack. After you charge it up, Sonic will auto-lock onto all nearby enemies and destroy them within seconds. I initially thought there would be no utility in such a move since in a game that encourages me to go fast, stopping in my tracks to destroy some mildly threatening egg pawns just seemed pointless in games like Adventure 1 and 2. It was slightly useful in Heroes, but only because there are some forced combat sequences in that game. Omens has its fair share of forced combat sequences to incentivize the usage of the move, but fortunately to a much lesser and more natural extent, and in those moments, the light speed attack comes pretty handy. It's one of those things that you won't think much of as you progress through the game, but at the end of the day, you're still thankful for it being included. I should also mention Sonic also has the bound jump, which allows him to rebound off the ground to reach certain heights, and it feels immensely satisfying to use. A semi-new ability Sonic has is the Energy Whip, a beam of blue energy that can shoot from Chip's wristband, which I can only assume was directly inspired by the Inner Beam from Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric of all things. The Energy Whip allows Sonic to take certain shortcuts by swinging on nearby runes. Simply put, this is a sick new move that allows for some neat traversal and mobility. That pretty much does it for Sonic's moveset, and I think about now, my reasons for enjoying this game are clear. This isn't some proof of concept or unique experiment like other fan games. This is a fully realized 2022 3D Sonic game that carries over many attributes from past official titles, and blends them together, which all accumulates in a vastly enjoyable experience. One that's held together with shockingly good level design. It's definitely not for everyone since the blend of so many gameplay styles could potentially feel messy, but as a fan of adventure gameplay, boost gameplay, and the openness of the stages, I'm all game. But there's more to Sonic Omens than, well, Sonic, and that is the ultimate life form himself, Shadow the Hedgehog. That's right, alongside Sonic, Shadow is the second primary character in the game with unique stages tailored around his moveset. Yep, unlike most cases, Shadow isn't just a reskin of Sonic gameplay-wise. While yes, he does have the spin dash, homing attack, light speed dash, and boost, moves like the light speed attack, energy whip, and rebound jump are completely inaccessible. In place of all of that are 4 chaos abilities, each of its own function. There's the Chaos Spear, which allows Shadow to launch a bolt of chaos energy at a specified target. This is often used to activate switches, but it can also be used against enemies, and it's not as cool as it sounds. Not only is homing attacking way faster, but using Chaos Spears will burn through your Chaos meter pretty fast, and that's a huge waste when you could be using more efficient abilities. Case in point, Chaos Control. Easily the best Chaos ability by a mile. As you might expect, this allows you to completely slow down time, and this can be used for multiple scenarios. If you need to avoid fast-moving obstacles, render enemies defenseless, or just feel like an overpowered badass, Chaos Control is your go-to. I cannot tell you how many times this move saved my life. Next is the Chaos Dash, which is self-explanatory. It enables Shadow to dash in whichever direction, which is often used to shake up the platforming of the level, and yeah, it's fine. It can be a little awkward figuring out how to dash upwards though. And finally, there's Chaos Blast, a move that, in an instant, clears every nearby threat in your surrounding radius. Chaos Control is easily the most useful, but Chaos Blast is my personal favorite because, I mean, look at it! I'm Shadow the mother-trucking hedgehog obliterating crowds of egg pawns in a single instance. What else could I ask for? Seriously though, I really want to commend the devs for not taking the easy route with playable Shadow and actually going the extra mile to make him feel like a separate character from Sonic. They both play alike and have enough differences to make each stand out. What's interesting is both of these characters can play each other's levels, and when I first realized this, I was filled with excitement. I thought this meant that if I played Shadow Paradise as Shadow or United Railroad of Sonic, I'd be able to use each character's unique ability to find previously hidden and inaccessible shortcuts, and maybe be rewarded with red rings or score bonuses for doing so. But unfortunately this wasn't the case, and playing a stage with a character it wasn't designed for will make it significantly less fun, since Shadow can't energy whip on runes and Sonic obviously can't use chaos abilities. Maybe I'm asking too much, especially considering how incredible the game is already, but I thought I'd bring it up since I think it was a missed opportunity. While we're being critical, I guess it's time to talk about the aspects of the game that players seem to not be so keen on, such as the tornado stages. As Sonic points in the game, you'll take control of Tails inside of the tornado, and have the task of piloting it to a hazardous area. Before I even say anything, I respect the hell out of Owlbow Studio for even attempting an alternate gameplay style this ambitious. We've been able to pilot the tornado in the official games, but only in on-rail segments. Here, however, the plane is fully in the player's control and you can freely navigate open terrain with little to no issue. One thing to keep in mind is that I played Omens on a more recent build, so I don't know how these levels played originally and if people's hatred for them is justified. But I can tell you that from my experience, they play just fine. The controls for the tornado are pretty smooth and the overall level design is solid for the most part. The two things you gotta watch out for are enemy aerial vehicles and terrain-based obstacles. The former of which you can shoot down using either conventional gunfire or rechargeable rockets that can come in handy for beefier threats. While Sonic and Shadow stages are all about speed, Tails is about patience and timing. You're encouraged to move carefully while simultaneously being aware of your surroundings, and it works. These levels are pretty calming and can act as a nice break from the main speed-based gameplay and offer some nice variety. These levels also aren't particularly difficult since the tornado has a health bar that can be replenished by collecting rings and destroying nearby health packs, which there are plenty of. If I had to think of any notable issues, the length of these stages comes to mind. On a first playthrough, they can definitely last quite a while, especially because there's backtracking and no waypoint to indicate where you need to go. Secondly, sometimes the collision can be a little whack. Just bumping into the tiniest thing can damage your plane and disorientate you in the process, which can sometimes get annoying. Both of these issues are only amplified in Weeping Rift. Other than that, however, I see no problem with these levels and think the community definitely overreacted a bit, which is no surprise at this point. But even if you're not a fan of them, there are only 3 in the entire game, with one of them being a boss fight, so I think you're good. Speaking of which, the boss fights. Another element of this game the community despises, with most claiming they're way too difficult and poorly balanced. To no one's surprise, this is yet another instance where I have to question if I even played the same game as these people. Don't get me wrong, the boss fights here are certainly no cakewalk, and definitely have some challenge to them. But do you know why that is? Because these boss fights, well, play like boss fights. Each of the bosses have patterns of attack that the player has to learn and exploit in order to stay alive until an opening presents itself. Not only is this process extremely fun, but it gives these fights a lot of depth and makes them more than just an enemy sponge for you to attack repeatedly. Also, regarding difficulty, I'm at a loss here. I got my ass handed to me on some of these encounters, but once I actually figured out what I was supposed to do, I cleared most of these fights with next to no trouble. They are not that hard. I hate to be that guy, but if people find these fights so hard they're unplayable, it might be a tiny skill issue, just a bit. Just to be clear, I'm not even really good at Sonic games, but aside from the final boss, none of these fights really took me more than 3 attempts to finish. I guess most Sonic fans could be used to the laughably easy bosses in the official games and that's why they have trouble here, but if that's the case, I would recommend they expand their game palette because good lord. Now that we've covered basically every major gameplay element, I want to take some time to go over each individual stage, since I have some thoughts I want to share about each of them. But don't worry, I'll be brief. Probably. Starting off with episode 1, The Breakthrough, is Wellspring, which does its job nicely as a tutorial level. I cannot tell you how many times I've played a game that has a banger opening level, but it gets ruined because I get bombarded with pop-ups telling me how to move the analog stick or that I need to press X to jump. So having a slow stage dedicated to teaching newcomers how to play was a smart move. That way, once we get to Chao Paradise, it's full speed ahead. I love this level. Not only does it look gorgeous, but it's just so much fun. It teaches you a few of the basics such as the lightspeed attack and the energy whip move, but aside from that, Chao Paradise is basically the green hill of this game. It's a fun, fast-paced playground that makes use of all of the game's mechanics to let you know what you're in for. I also love how effectively water is used here. Similar to Unleashed, if Sonic is moving at a fast enough speed or in the process of boosting, he'll be able to run on water. In Omens, if you fail, you'll simply sink to the bottom and you'll have to maneuver through your typical underwater Sonic section until you get back up. I love this design since, like the classic games, it highly incentivizes the player to maintain a certain speed and punishes them for failing to do so with a harder, more inconvenient route. And Chao Paradise makes good use of this mechanic and has its fair share of alternate routes and pathways. It's a fun time. And after that is the first boss in the game, Dragoon E0. Yes, this robot is a rusted, abandoned prototype of the Egg Dragoon from Unleashed, and I for one think that's cool. Stuff like this makes the world of Sonic feel much more realized. Anyways, the fight is just fine. Like most in the game, it's all about timing, with the mech's core only being exposed for a brief moment after each attack sequence. It's a fun challenge and does a good job of introducing how the bosses will play going forward. That concludes episode 1, and episode 2, Temple of Sand, kicks off of Area 99. If that name sounds familiar, yes, this is the same Area 99 from episode 2 of Sonic X, but made actually playable. Have I mentioned I love this game yet? Anyways, this stage is much more fast-paced and action-oriented than Shadow Paradise, and I love it for that. It's more linear, but it makes up for that with really good level design. Following it up is the first tornado level, Wild Ridge. I already went over how these stages play earlier, so I'm not going to go too in-depth here. It's a fine level that adds variety and encourages patience and careful handling. The next stage is escaping a Null, which is another tornado level but with a twist. This first half has Sonic and Tails trying to escape a giant serpent-like monster. This part of the stage is pretty adrenaline-inducing, and I like how the monster's gigantic body will move and act as obstacles you have to dodge and weave from. The second half is the boss fight against Null itself, and the tornado handles surprisingly well here. Like most fights, you just have to wait and predict Null's attacks until he exposes his weakness for you to shoot. I know, this game might as well be Dark Souls. Episode 3, White Jungle, starts off with a returning stage actually. I bet you can guess what it is. White Jungle from Sonic Adventure 2. Except this time, it has a cool new stormy aesthetic. It plays just fine, but similar to Generations, it feels great to replay an older stage with this newer boost gameplay. Next is Tree Palace, which is super unique in design, for better or worse. Instead of running forward to reach the end goal, you're finding ways to ascend this ginormous tree. Platforming is really emphasized here, and it's a lot more slower paced than traditional speed stages. Imagine climbing the Raya Island towers from Sonic Frontiers but with alternate routes, and that's basically what Tree Palace is as a stage. I wasn't too keen on Tree Palace when I first played the game, but it's definitely grown on me, as I've come to enjoy and appreciate its verticality and huge excess of platforming. The next stage is Waterfall Chase, which has Sonic trying to outrun a flooding water current. What makes this level pretty unique is it kind of acts as a speed section from 06, except, you know, they don't play like garbage. The goal here is to run as fast as humanly possible to avoid instant death, and despite the stage's short length, it still makes an impression of the spectacle of the tree rapidly flooding as you run. GUN Arsenal kicks off episode 4, Shadow of Water, and serves as Shadow's tutorial level. It's a fine level, and I like the red and black color scheme, but design-wise, it's a little too linear for my taste with not much going on. However, I do think the music here kicks ass, and this fun Easter egg where you can find Vector hanging out in the computer room is awesome. It's stuff like this where you can really see just how much love went into making this insane fan game. Moldy Jungle comes after, and like GUN Arsenal, it's fine. I think the scenery is cool, and Shadow's chaos abilities are required for some neat bits of platforming, but overall, it's mostly uninteresting to go back and replay. Concluding episode 4 is a boss against the Vortex, another chaos monster. What makes this fight stand out is that instead of waiting for the boss to expose its weak point, it's instead always available for you to damage. However, it's your responsibility to watch out for the Vortex's attacks and observe his animations, so you can predict an incoming move. This makes the Vortex a way more fast-paced fight than the others. Making use of Shadow's chaos abilities here to get some easy hits in makes it all the more exciting. Once its health reaches halfway, the boss will disappear and Shadow will have to make his escape from the underground structure as water begins flooding in. This initiates an awesome set piece where you're speeding towards the exit as the Vortex tries to grab you from the walls, leading all the way up to Phase 2. Both parties are done playing games, and the amazing track and highlight of the OST, Rise Out, is blasting at full gear. And Shadow taking off his inhibitor rings to completely annihilate the monster is the last cherry on top, and a perfect way to close out episode 4. Episode 5, The Exiled, is playing no games, since it opens with easily the best stage in the entire package, United Railroad. I adore this level so much, and it's easily one of the biggest highlights of the entire experience. United Railroad is a behemoth of a level that usually goes on for 10 or 12 minutes, and in that time, it would throw awesome platforming section after awesome platforming section at the player with no mercy. Not only is speed greatly emphasized here, but this stage was constructed entirely for you to make the absolute most of your chaos abilities. There are so many sections that can be tackled in a different way depending on which abilities you choose to utilize at the moment, making it so much fun to revisit. And if things couldn't get better, it ends on a train sequence where Shadow is attempting to apprehend Eggman before Sonic does. Once you board the train, there are compartments full of egg ponds, there's dropping containers you gotta watch out for, and on the roof, your reaction time will be tested by oncoming signs and billboards that can be sidestepped or slid under. And it all ends with a flawless, sexy cutscene transition of Shadow and Sonic making contact with the train is derailed by Eggman's giant robot. I love this stage so much, and it's peak Sonic level design. Episode 5 is definitely one of the shorter episodes because right after is the concluding boss, the Metal Ember. Finally, a one-on-one fight between Sonic and Eggman. This battle is so much fun. The fact that it's on rails and you have to wait for an opening might make you think this is just another Colors, Lost World, or Force's final Eggman fight, but don't worry, it's not. First off, the movement here is much more free instead of being chopped up to 3 lanes, and second off, the Metal Ember has some really cool attacks. It can shoot missiles, it can shoot out giant balls of energy, and has a giant laser beam. The player has to be on their toes here since their reaction time has to be basically flawless. It's not just the fight itself that's cool, but also just the sheer spectacle of Sonic chasing Eggman as he destroys parts of the city in his crazy attempts to exterminate him. There are also a lot of Sonic X Easter eggs and references around the city which I really appreciate. Yeah, like you should expect by now, the Metal Ember is a kick-ass fight that does a great job closing episode 5. Episode 6, Worlds Colliding, starts off the final tornado level, Weeping Rift, which is definitely the least enjoyable stage in the entire game. It's not bad necessarily, but my problem with it is it just goes on forever. It can be quite difficult to navigate due to the deadly springs and enemy robots that can take your plane down. When you combine that with the length, yeah, I was pretty miserable playing this for the first time. What saves it is the hauntingly beautiful atmosphere and somber, chilling music on display. Very fitting considering the newly discovered stakes in the story at this point in the game. I also like the semi-final chase sequence of Ember towards the end. After that is Shadow's final level and boss fight of the game, Maria. Yeah, the story gets crazy here, so don't ask questions and just roll with it for now. This fight is simultaneously the hardest one in the game, and yet the easiest. There is so much stuff flying everywhere on the screen that makes it insanely difficult to avoid getting hit, and this battle is pure chaos. But so long as you cling on to one ring like your life depends on it, you should get through it, and an S rank is not difficult to achieve. The last speed stage of the game in the conclusion of episode 6 is the Citadel of Lotus. This stage acts as any Final Sonic stage should. It is long, unpredictable, and pretty damn difficult. Seriously, on my first attempt playing this level, I wanted to break something. I don't even know how to describe it. There are like a gazillion amount of intense platforming sections. Your reaction time is to be nothing short of flawless, and the enemies here want you dead with a capital D. It can be very frustrating playing through this for your first time, but once you get used to it, I think the Citadel of Lotus is probably one of the best levels in the game. The mid-air underwater sequences, the fast pace, it's so much fun. Just go in prepared if you want to check this game out. Finally, we've made it to the end, episode 7, The Last Omen. This episode is only comprised of one boss fight, the Exiled, who serves as the final boss in the game. And let me tell you, our Bowl Studios certainly saved the best for last. This fight acts as a traditional final Supersonic fight, but with a twist. Sonic doesn't have his super form available 24/7, at least in the first phase, and the Exiled is strong enough to strike Sonic out of it. So what you have to do is use your natural speed to fill your boost gauge until you can do a Chaos Blast, which will change you super and stun the Exiled. You then have a very brief window of opportunity to inflict some free damage before you have to regain your super form. I love this for so many reasons. First of all, the challenge here is really unique. See, you can use your boost, and doing so will make dodging incoming attacks much easier, but doing so delays the opportunity for a Chaos Blast, so the player has to think critically about when it's wise to use the boost, if at all, which adds so much depth to the battle. Secondly, there are multiple ways to fill your boost gauge. One is by running into these weird bubbles around the arena, and the other is attacking the Exiled's forces when they drop down to assist their master. This provides plenty of opportunities for you to earn some boost, but this makes it easy to forget that there's a Dark Souls knight wielding a Sly Cooper cane who wants you dead. So again, this presents another choice the player has to consciously make throughout the fight. Should you worry about dodging the Exiles so you don't lose any more boost or rings? Or should you solely focus on filling your gauge as fast as humanly possible? This first phase is so brilliantly designed, and it can prove to be a big challenge on the first playthrough. After completion of the first phase, you transition to the second and perhaps the coolest cutscene I've ever seen in a Sonic game. In the second phase, you have your super form permanently, but you still need your Chaos Blast to stun the exiled, and his attacks can make you lose rings, rendering you still vulnerable. So you have to use Sonic's greatest weapon, his speed, in order to fill the boost gauge and earn a window for attack. All while this is happening, all of the Omens of Chaos are gathered around to witness this battle, and the weight of the road is blasting at full volume. This is how you cap off a game. Now that I've covered each stage, it's time to delve into the replayability Omens offers. Because yes, even though this is a fan game of 18 stages, alternate gameplay styles, and entire boss fights, Outbow Studios still found time to give players an incentive to go back and replay levels. Just like the official games, most stages in Omens contain a set of 5 red rings for the player to find and collect. This usually encourages exploration and replayability in most modern games, and here it's no different. Well, except for one thing. These red rings are hidden really well. You won't find all of them by playing through a level normally and just keeping your eyes open. No, if you want to collect these red rings, you'll be going out of your way to find them, and in the process, you'll discover just how many alternate and secret pathways these stages contain because my goodness. Collecting all of the red rings in a stage will unlock background lore for each location you visit, and these will often add to the world building of this universe and clarify elements of the main story that wasn't thoroughly fleshed out. This is a cool reward. However, if you collect all 65 red rings in the game, you'll unlock one last piece of the story. And yeah, I won't get into it now, but it's definitely not the upbeat and triumphant reward I expected for all of my hard work. Another reason to go back and replay Omens is the ranking system. Upon completing stages, the player will be ranked with a letter grade based on their performance just like in the official titles. I went out of my way to obtain every S rank in this game, and unfortunately, there wasn't much reason for me to do so. Unlike the red rings, you don't get anything for getting S ranks. And you know what? I wouldn't care all that much if the actual process of getting S ranks were fun, but they aren't. And that's because the ranking system is primarily score based instead of time based, something that started with Adventure 2 and carried all the way to Forces. In this model, an impressive time on a level isn't good enough to get a good ranking. The player has to resort to other ways of earning scores, such as having a massive ring bonus and destroying as many enemies as possible. This makes the process of earning a perfect rank super boring since you're not necessarily doing anything noteworthy or impressive. You're just going through a level as slowly as possible trying not to miss a ring or any potential enemies. Generations was the game to finally fix this problem in a rather pretty clever way. A lot of score is still needed in order to get a good ranking, but this time around, your time bonus is what's really imperative to earn that score, making S ranks all about speed, which is appropriate for a Sonic game. Unfortunately, in Omen's case, time bonuses aren't all that important, and they have the same problem as older titles. Instead of beating a stage as fast as possible in order to earn a perfect rank, you instead have to slowly progress through a level and make sure you don't miss anything that could contribute to your score, making this process slow and tedious. I know it's not that big of a deal since there's no reason to go for S ranks in the first place, but still, it's something worth pointing out. For Omen's 3-year anniversary, our Ouroboros celebrated by putting out a 3.2.0 update that added some new Game Plus content. First off, it added Super Sonic into the base game, allowing the player to use him whenever they feel like it. This, as you probably expect, is a hell of a lot of fun. And Shadow got a little something as well. It's not major, but his Chaos Spear was updated so that it auto-locks into enemies without requiring precise aiming. This makes the ability much more convenient and fun to use. That's pretty much it with everything regarding this update aside from bug fixes, and I commend devs for implementing Super Sonic into every speed stage, and I'm glad they put in the extra effort despite all the negativity the project got. I think we have everything gameplay wise covered. With all that out of the way, it's time to dive into one giant aspect of Omens that I was genuinely surprised by: the story. On top of fully realized stages, cutscenes, visuals, and gameplay styles, this game decided it already wasn't crazy enough, and it has a surprisingly really imaginative narrative that draws inspiration from other Sonic media to tell a fully original and compelling story. Before I ramble on about it, note that I won't hold back on spoilers, and if you couldn't tell yet, I think Omen's story is one that should be experienced blind since it's a really fun, wild, and creative ride. If you want to experience the story for yourself or you're simply uninterested in seeing me talk about it, this video is segmented into chapters. So simply skip to the next one and we can start wrapping things up. For those of you who are sticking around though, let's begin. The game opens with a panning shot showcasing a bunch of relics and items from Sonic's past adventures, until we see the Hedgehog himself relaxing in the attic of Tails' workshop. Tails barges in with a radio and turns on an ongoing news report that's talking about a recent theft of a Chaos Emerald by none other than Dr. Eggman. I don't know if it's a coincidence or not, but the voice of the radio sounds pretty similar to the news anchor from Sonic X, and if this was done intentionally, that's pretty awesome.
Professor Robotnik, also known as Eggman, captured the Chaos Emerald. Again.
Eyewitnesses at the site report that construction machinery seemed to malfunction whenever it came within close contact of this strange jewel.
Hearing the news, Sonic is of course enthusiastic to foil yet another scheme from Eggman, and tells us a lead due to some strange activity from a nearby abandoned Eggman outpost. This kicks off the main plot, but before we move forward, there are some things we need to discuss, such as where this story even takes place on the timeline. Like I mentioned earlier, Omens is a continuation of Sonic X, but not a direct one, since this story takes place about 2 decades after the events of the Meta X arc. If you're wondering how Sonic is in the same world as humans when in Sonic X, he and his friends had to go back to their homeworld to avoid the freezing of time, it's actually explained in a pretty interesting way. After being sent back to his dimension by Eggman, Chris Thorndike was able to find a way to not only unify Earth and Mobius, but utilize the energy of chaos to stabilize the synchronization of both dimensions so time doesn't come to a complete standstill. This event we're going to be referred to as the Unity of Worlds. At the time this game was being developed, Tails 2 wasn't a thing and hadn't yet provided a solid answer behind if humans and animals existed in 2 separate worlds or were all in one landmass. So with that in mind, this is a pretty neat headcanon. During this gap in time after the Unity of Worlds, the events of Unleashed took place, canonizing that game's story, making this all set right before Colors. However, due to conflicting continuities between the main games and Sonic X, I think it's safe to rule out the Advanced Trilogy, Heroes, Shadow the Hedgehog, and 06 as canon to this game's story. Now that we have a firm grasp on where we are in the timeline, we can more accurately judge how well these characters are translated in the story Omens is trying to tell. Sonic, to me, is pretty well characterized. He's inspiring, likes to nap, and is pretty laid back but can get very much serious when the stakes are high enough. Tails is also done pretty well here. He's still somewhat dependent on Sonic, but after all the experiences he's been through in Sonic X, he has a lot more independence and confidence here, which is really appropriate. I get his characterization might not match that of the meta era which this game's supposed to be setting up, but I mean, is anyone out here complaining? Back to the story, Tails gives Sonic a lift to Eggman's outpost, passing Knuckles who's doing his usual routine of keeping an eye on their Master Emerald. On their way to the outpost though, they fly right into the airspace of gun drones, who are presented as an ominous, terrifying force of nature, and I love it. Shadow 05 disappointingly degraded Gun into a generic military agency, which was continued in 06 until the mainline games just forgot they even existed. And don't get me started on how pathetic they are in the movies. Thankfully, Omens takes Gun back to their Adventure 2 roots of being an antagonistic, deadly, militarized force that no one but Eggman has the gong to fuck with. This is the same agency that slaughtered an entire research facility of innocent people to keep their dirty tracks clean. This is the same agency that demolished a city block just to capture one wrongly accused hedgehog. This is the same agency that chased Sonic and friends across an entire city with everything in their disposal just to get the job done. GUN are not the good guys. They were never the good guys. And this game recognizes that and has it play to its story's strength. Sonic and Tails fall from the air, but Sonic doesn't hit the ground due to a strange energy beam coming from Chip's wristband that seems to have grabbed into a nearby rune. Yes, this game acknowledges Chip's wristband. Why is it so hard, Sega? The two heroes see that Eggman's robots are here at Paradise Island, so Tails goes to check on the Chow Gardens, as Sonic makes a run for the old Eggman Tower. It's explained in the additional lore that this island used to be a peaceful place populated by Chow until Eggman invaded it and built a base here. He was driven out by GUN, and after this, a legal agreement was made with Sonic called the Mutual Protection Act, an agreement that places the Chaos Emeralds under Sonic's ownership and protection. The catch is that if Sonic were ever to let them fall into Eggman's hands, ownership would be forfeit. This is a cool idea, but it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. You see, all 7 of the Chaos Emeralds are scattered across the globe, with some even being untouched since the Unity of Worlds. So how are they in anyone's ownership if no one has any idea where they are? And furthermore, shouldn't it be Sonic's responsibility to collect all 7 and store them someplace under his watchful eye? Or hell, just give them to Knuckles. Anyway, the two arrive at Eggman's direct outpost and Tails begins accessing the computer for any useful information when he trips the security system, triggering an Egg Dragoon prototype to be deployed. Sonic unsurprisingly makes quick work of it, and from the robot, Sonic obtains data that's able to track Eggman's location. Why Eggman would put something like that in his death robot that's meant to kill anyone who's trying to look for him, I do not know. But what's important is that Sonic and Tails know he's headed for the Grand Canyon, so that's where they take off to. It's also worth noting that the Master Emerald is acting pretty strange, preventing Sonic and Tails from communicating with Knuckles, and that, along with Chip's wristband acting strange all of a sudden, is all proving something odd is going on here. Our heroes track Eggman all the way to Area 99, which despite the name, oddly isn't the same exact Area 99 from the show. This is a research facility created by Chris Thorndike after he climbed the ranks and became the head of GUN. I know that sounds odd, but when you take into account how brilliant of a scientist Chris is and how much experience he's had with world-ending threats, yeah, I couldn't think of anyone better for the position. I wonder what Abraham Tower is doing right now. Under his leadership, the agency was able to be reformed for a short period. Because they weren't invited, Sonic and Tails had to do this the hard way and they break into the facility to cut across it and fly into the Wild Ridge. A treacherous canyon that has the entrance to an old temple that, according to the game, houses the Master Emerald. What? I actually think this is a typo and the devs meant Chaos Emerald because the Master Emerald has always been kept on Angel Island. It's even what keeps the whole thing in the sky, so I have no idea at what point could this have been the original holding place of the Master Emerald. Tails is able to pilot through the harsh valley, but upon entering the temple, he notices strange markings in the ancient walls that illustrate strange, ominous creatures. They make it right on time to see Eggman stealing an emerald, which is further evidence that this whole Master Emerald thing was a typo, when a giant creature comes out of nowhere, yeets Eggman's ass into a wall, and gives chase to Sonic and Tails. They're able to outrun and seemingly destroy the monster, retrieving the red emerald from it. They continue after Eggman. Meanwhile, a strange, ominous figure lurks beneath the surface, mentioning Thorndike and referring to the creature as the first Omen. So the plot thickens. Real quick, I love Sonic stories like these. Having the story bait you into a typical Sonic vs. Eggman plot, only to turn around to be a grand, larger in scope narrative is, in my opinion, the perfect structure of a Sonic story. I know there are some who like it when things are a lot simpler and it's just Eggman as the main threat, but there are only so many times that formula can work before it starts to get a little stale after a while. To me, Eggman works best as a recurring familiar threat that serves to get the story going until the stakes get bigger and a new threat is introduced. That's why I love the adventure and dark era of Sonic storytelling so much. Sonic and Tails continue chasing Eggman to the White Jungle when for some reason the nearby GUN robots start attacking the pair only. Sonic hops out of the tornado to distract them and the two split up. Like I mentioned earlier, this is the same White Jungle from Adventure 2, and apparently it was able to recover from the Prison Island explosion. Sure. It's also mentioned the jungle was the base of operations for a gang of jackals until they were driven off by GUN, which could be a reference to the Jackal Squad of mercenaries from the Sonic Forces prequel comic. If so, that's a pretty nice Easter egg. Sonic eventually makes it to the Hella Sin tree, which is a pretty brutal climb normally, hence its name. But Sonic, being Sonic, makes it up there no sweat, and retrieves the emerald that's lied dormant ever since the Unity of Worlds. Taking it results in a massive flood that quickly begins engulfing the tree, and Sonic is barely able to escape and make it back onto the tornado, with Tails saving his life. The two friends rejoice in their victory until the emeralds being in close contact emit a bright beacon, just like in the show, that gives them away to everyone nearby and the tornado is shot down. We didn't change perspective from Sonic's story to, you guessed it, the ultimate lifeform himself, Shadow the Hedgehog. In Sonic X, the Meta-X arc concluded with Shadow being lost somewhere in space, but it's revealed that after the Unity of Worlds, Chris, along with his assistant, were able to find him and bring him back to Earth. With that cleared up, it's time to have a conversation that, to be honest, I'm a little tired of having. Shadow's characterization. When Shadow is written accurately, he is easily one of my 3 favorite characters in the series. But that's the problem. For a long time, the dark, brooding hero with a tragic past but a good heart who wants to do the right thing was downgraded to a soulless, edgy Vegeta wannabe. And here, despite a clear attempt to make his character interesting, I feel the writing team just leans a little too far into the edge. Shadow in this game isn't a good person or even all that likable. Sure, he's cool and does some badass stuff in the game and even has some cool lines, but aside from the aesthetic of his character, there's not much there. And I get it, this isn't Game Shadow, this is Sonic X Shadow. During the Meta-X arc, much like the games, Shadow had lost all of his memories and was basically a blank slate character who was prepared to kill a defenseless girl if it meant doing some objective good. And yeah, no one's arguing that Shadow is a saint, but at the same time, it was still clear he was obviously a good person. Molly's death in the show shook Shadow to his core, and because of it, he immediately avenged her and still honors her grave. Someone he had barely met but still greatly admired and respected because of her good heart and bravery. Or in the final battle, when Sonic is about to save all of his friends of Chaos Control, which would have surely killed him, Shadow stepped in and sent him falling, deciding to do it himself since Sonic's death would be guaranteed and his Chaos powers are much more refined, knowing full well the risk. Even during his first appearance in the arc, he instinctively saves Chris without knowing who he is, what's going on, and having no recollection of his memories. Kind of like in Heroes when he instinctively saves Rouge after being reawakened. All of those instances go to show that Shadow the Hedgehog, above all else, is a hero. Sure, he's a no-nonsense person, but he cares. And unfortunately, I just don't get that impression of this version of Shadow. It's also revealed that he still wants to honor the promise he made to Maria, which is why he decided to work for GUN, and this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. A common misconception about the character is that he still cares about Maria and wants to do right by her promise, but this is just not the case. In Shadow the Hedgehog, the whole point of that game was for Shadow to strive to understand who he is until he realizes that ultimately, he shouldn't be bound by his past anymore, that his destiny is his to be determined. That game ends with him saying goodbye to the Shadow of the past. That's the reason he works for GUN in 06 in a way of showing that Shadow's past is now completely irrelevant, so he holds no ill will towards Gun and decides to work with them if that's what's going to allow him to do the most good. This is a misconception and subsequent retcon that Shadow Generations made. I get that's Game Shadow, but I think the same thing applies to X Shadow, who doesn't even remember Maria at all, and isn't really too concerned about remembering who he was. So him joining GUN because of Maria is a little odd and doesn't really hold up. With the rant finally over, let's get back to the plot of Omens, shall we? We flash back to Shadow completing a personalized training simulation before he makes it to a meeting with the heads of GUN, who are pissed with Sonic due to this whole mess of the Chaos Emeralds. They order Shadow to go retrieve it, and it's here where we find out that GUN are working with this same mysterious figure we saw back in episode 2. This guy is called the Exiled, is confirmed to have been Chris's assistant during his time as head of GUN, but not much else is known about him. Though it is hinted that he and Shadow may have made a deal of sorts. Back to the present, Shadow rides through the now flooded jungle filled with poisonous quicksand and egg ponds as he's briefed by Rouge on the situation. Quick side note, I will say this. The writers nailed the friendship between Shadow and Rouge. Nowadays, in the games and especially the comics, these two are treated as simple acquaintances when that is just not the case, so it was nice seeing that corrected here. Also, while this cutscene is going on, Shadow just decides to order farm.
Shadow, are you listening to me?
Show off. Shadow makes it through the jungle and into the Tree Palace Temple, but discovers that the emerald is missing. Suddenly, the floor beneath him collapses and he falls deeper into the temple, with his emerald falling down and awakening a new chaos monster. Despite it being some mysterious ancient being, it ain't got shit on the ultimate life form, who after taking off his inhibitor rings, obliterates it in an instant. Bad ass. Before he or Rouge can make sense of what they saw, Shadow sees Eggman making a fast getaway and quickly runs after him. We finally switch back to Sonic and Tails, and while they're both knocked out after the crash, Eggman steals both of their emeralds, now having a total of 3. Sonic comes to and is quick to check on Tails, but is interrupted when Shadow appears and mocks him for acquiring help instead of being able to handle things alone. Kinda hypocritical, Shadow, considering you have an entire agency helping you out, but okay. Shortly after, the dialogue between these two gets wildly confusing, so I'll just let it play out.
I can't get distracted from my mission.
Not so fast. Leave Eggman to me. I still owe him a butt kicking for what happened on the island.
Remind me, wasn't it GUN and your friend that stopped Eggman? When you could not.
That's because you knocked me off the island!
Well, maybe you should stop getting in my way.
On my first couple of playthroughs, this cutscene always confused the hell out of me because I had no idea what either of these two were talking about. They clearly weren't referencing Sonic X, so what was it? Then, as I was working on this video, I put 2 and 2 together and realized the island Sonic is referring to is Paradise Island from episode 1, and this whole conversation was basically just giving further insight into the events that transpired there and what led to the Mutual Protection Act. That took me a while to figure out, mostly because this cutscene relies on you having got all the red rings knowing this information, but obviously on your first playthrough, this won't be the case. Regardless of how odd this dialogue might be the first time around, I still appreciate that this game gave us a Sonic and Shadow fight, no matter how brief. It's interrupted when Tails shoots at Shadow, giving Sonic a head start at the Eggman, before the tornado is quickly destroyed with a Chaos Spear. Now having 2 Hedgehogs in the entirety of GUN on his ass, Eggman flees to a secret base he constructed at an abandoned railway which previously connected continents until the regrowth of the White Jungle overtook its largest depot. Shadow catches up with Sonic on Eggman's train, but as the two lock eyes, the mad genius emerges with a newly constructed robot and destroys the train. Before he comes to, Shadow has a sudden vision of Maria calling to him, which isn't the first time this has happened to him in the game, which even Shadow himself doesn't have an explanation for. Sonic speeds up the Eggman, but before Shadow can continue his pursuit of the Chaos Emeralds, the Exiled contacts him and mysteriously tells him to lay off and let Gun handle things. Now being fully cornered with nowhere else to run, Eggman powers his mech with the 3 Chaos Emeralds he's collected thus far to try and destroy his arch nemesis once and for all. Because in his words, this time, he can't afford to lose. I adore the classic Sonic and Eggman exchanges during this boss fight. Sonic calling Eggman Robotnik and telling him to give up, Eggman claiming his machine to be invincible and howling like a madman. I love it. Just like how all these classic showdowns end, Sonic emerges victorious with Eggman lying in utter defeat next to his broken robot. GUN quickly catches up and apprehends the Doctor while also securing the Chaos Emeralds. Sonic argues against this, but GUN drone reminds him of the Conditions of Mutual Protection Act, and I don't know why he's so shocked here. It was your responsibility to protect the emeralds, and not only did Eggman get a hold of 3 of them, but you didn't even know where all of them were. As Eggman is being transported, something violent knocks everyone back, revealing the true nature of the figure we've seen lurking in the shadows. A Metarex. That's right, bitches, the main villain of this game is a Metarex who is in control of his own army and has been pulling the strings of the entire story. In Sonic X, the Metarex is some of the most intimidating and ominous antagonists we've seen introduced in the franchise, so a continuation of that story in game form had to have these guys come back, and they most certainly do. The Exile steals the 3 emeralds, and with GUN having outlived the usefulness to him, the Metarex has his troops make short work of their forces and Shadow knocks Sonic unconscious, revealing he and the Exiled have been working together the entire time. More on this later. Sonic then has a dream sequence where we finally get our first glimpse of Chris Thorndyke in the game, before he wakes up in an unfamiliar place with Tails at his side. And another unexpected ally, Dr. Eggman. He and Tails rescued Sonic from the urban city after he was knocked unconscious, and just like any good Sonic story, these 3 have to form a desperate alliance now that things have gotten serious. Thanks to Eggman, a lot more things start to become clear, such as Chris's full involvement with GUN, and what the Exile's true intentions are. If you remember at the end of Sonic X Season 3, Chris was offered a way home to his family, but was warned that a trip across dimensions could age or de-age his body to any extent. Well, this game has that slight ramification actually have consequences, with Chris being aged rapidly when he comes back to Earth and only having 15 years to live. In that time, he was able to become the head of GUN and reform the agency from the inside out, for it to become less war-torn going forward. During his tenure as GUN commander, it's unspecified when or how, but he met and befriended the Exiled, and the two formed a close partnership to change the world for the better. But after Chris's inevitable death, the new heads of GUN reverted the agency back to its destructive ways, and undid all of Chris's hard work, making the Exiled lose faith in humanity. Now that he's successfully gathered all 7 of the Chaos Emeralds, the Exiled wants to use them to manipulate time and space, and the only way to generate enough energy is by each of the emeralds to be destroyed. Doing so, however, will completely erase the world of the present, killing everyone and everything. That explains the appearances of the Chaos monsters, Null, Vortex, and Ember. They are all the Omens of Chaos. Ancient beings who have been reawakened and seek to protect the gems from any destructive forces. They weren't drawn to them out of power, they were drawn to them out of duty. Yeah, this is a lot to take in, but I gotta say, Omens goes up and beyond in delivering on the many questions its story has presented. These are all really satisfying explanations that only adds to the imaginative world this game has constructed. You might think Chris befriending a Metarex and GUN being completely okay with it is very far-fetched, but it actually makes sense in the context of the story. For one, Chris was a very compassionate and kind character in Sonic X. Come at me, Chris haters. So him welcoming an abandoned and pitiful Metarex with open arms is very much in character. And it's explained in additional lore info that GUN did not treat the Exiled very kindly during Chris's time as commander, which is to be expected. After about 10 years or so, it's believable that GUN would have at least slightly warmed up to him by now, or at least enough to work with the guy. In addition to all that information, there's also some added context to the story of Unleashed, since it's specified that Eggman took advantage of the confusion stirred by Chris's death to try and awaken Dark Gaia, kicking off that game's events. Nothing to really say here, just thought that was neat. Also, I want to highlight how cool the destruction of the emeralds is as a concept considering the goal of this game's story. Like I already mentioned, this game is serving as the neat transition we never had between the Dark and Meta era, and if you recall from all of the 2010 stories, the emeralds were never brought up at all except for Generations. But those emeralds are presumably not the exact same ones since they all come from different time periods. Omens sets out to explain why the Chaos Emeralds are not used anymore, which is pretty cool. And look, the game finished development on August 10th, 2022, a few months before the release of Sonic Frontier. Okay, so maybe the timing could have been better, but A for effort. With the tornado being repaired, Sonic and Tails take off and make their way to the exiled Citadel. They regroup with Eggman, but before the three can reach the Citadel, Ember shows up, likely pissed he didn't get royalties for having his likeness used for Eggman's robot, and takes the Doctor out of the air. Sonic and Tails blast full speed ahead. Meanwhile, Shadow watches from inside the fortress before a haunting image of Maria appears before him and attacks him. After a chaotic and confusing fight, the image of Maria dissipates and is revealed to be the Exiled, who has now betrayed Shadow and has finally made clear the deal these two made. You remember those visions of Maria? Well, they've been going on for 2 years and have understandably been tormenting Shadow. At some point, the Exiled approached Shadow and offered to end these visions he's been having, but only if Shadow aided his plans to betray GUN and nab all the emeralds. But as we see in this cutscene, it actually turns out the Exile was the one who's been creating all these visions, and this is his twisted way of honoring the deal he made. While this is a good way of making the Exile stand out as an evil villain, this simultaneously makes Shadow look like an idiot. How did he not piece together that this guy was playing him for a fool? 1, he's a Meta-X. 2, he clearly has bad intentions considering his brutal betrayal of GUN and his attack on the city earlier. And 3rd, how did he even know about the visions? I don't see that as something Shadow would confide in anyone about, so the Exiled had to have been the one to inform Shadow the Hedgehog of them, which would immediately set off alarm bells. And did Shadow ever stop and think to ask how this Meta-X even had the power to stop random visions? The Meta-X are extremely powerful, but they don't have telepathic abilities. Which brings me to another question. How did the Exiled even cast these visions in the first place? It's explained he can use GUN drones to create convincing holographic imagery, but that couldn't have been the case earlier since Shadow had his Maria visions in his head rather than seeing her pop up in real locations, so that just doesn't add up. Look, I do think it's a neat twist, but more details could have been fleshed out more. Obviously, the Exile didn't inform Shadow on the whole destroying the universe thing, and now enraged of being deceived, the angered Hedgehog takes off his inhibitor rings and the two clash. But as we see later, not even the ultimate lifeform's raw power could overcome the Exiled. While this is all going down, Sonic and Tails near the Citadel, and Sonic rides a missile into the fortress, while Tails keeps Ember busy outside. Now in the heart of his operations, Sonic is able to make it through the grueling gauntlet of obstacles inside, getting banged up in the process. But as the Exiled exclaims, the Hedgehog is too late, since all the emeralds are in place and the portal is in the process of activating. Meanwhile, Tails gets hit out of the air by Ember, but to his fortune, the Omen sees the beacon of light and flies towards it. 6 of the emeralds shatter completely, but before the 7th one can, Sonic grabs it in the nick of time, but shortly after he's immediately subdued by the Meta-X, and the full mystery behind the Exiled is unveiled. Just like all Meta-X, the Exiled was once under Dark Oak's command, but after he stood up against his plan to wipe out all life in the galaxy, the Exiled was, well, exiled from his Meta-X brothers, and left in his citadel to die where he became feral and undignified before Chris found him and took pity. The Exiled was once a good person who genuinely wanted to help Chris make a brighter future, but after GUN ruined all the changes he made, the Exiled was convinced humanity wasn't worth saving, and the only thing he wants to do after all of the wars and hardships he's been through is to use his portal and the destruction of chaos to travel back in time to his home. No matter the cost. No matter how many lives will be wiped out in the process. The Exiled is a really awesome villain, and this revelation is great. I find it a little hard to believe the Exiled would be allowed to live after standing up to Dark Oak, considering that man was a ruthless monster, but this makes him a really compelling villain and neatly ties into the theme of Sonic X. Appreciating the home you have. In the first several arcs of the show, some of the Mobian characters were so dead set on finding their way back to the road, they couldn't appreciate this 4-in-1 and the people around them until they were able to adjust and get comfortable. And in the Homebound arc, Sonic and his friends have to go back home because of the time suspension phenomenon, and Chris learned to let go and appreciate the people in his life that he already had. In the Meta-X arc, Lucas could have escaped the life of war with his people and lived on a spaceship, but his intense desire to defend his home is what led to his people's destruction and his twisted transformation to Dark Oak. Home is a lot more than just a singular place, it's the people around you. This is the lesson that the exiled can't learn because of how he was treated. I just think that's so neat and it works so well for an antagonist. As the exiled goes on his evil monologue, Shadow appears, clearly exhausted and in no shape to fight, but he gets some much needed redemption when he launches a Chaos Spear, shattering the portal. It's here where the foreshadowing of Chip's wristband pays off, since because a part of Chip is in there, so too is the power of Light Gaia, which enables Sonic to turn super. But there's a catch. Sonic can't maintain the form forever, so he has to repeatedly gain enough energy to transform. Since destroying Sonic will likely result in more than enough energy to send him home, the two face off. This results in what I've already said is a spectacular final boss where in the midst of the battle, we get this amazing exchange.
This world has already proven unworthy. Your friend desired to change it, but his dreams died along with him. You too will not change anything.
Chris always was a dreamer, but he did change the world! Who are you to judge the world you gave up on?
Super Sonic and the Exile continue going toe-to-toe, with Sonic giving the Exiled every chance to stop and back down, but him ultimately refusing. After an intense, lengthy battle, the Exiled is ultimately defeated and mortally wounded.
You were the last Omen.
I'm no Omen, or a controller of light. I'm just a guy that lives to the fullest with the time I have, with no regrets. I'm Sonic the Hedgehog!
I see. Sonic the Hedgehog. I am the last of my kind. My last hope was to flee into the past as far as possible. Not to save someone, not to change something, but to see my own land for the last time, at any cost. I am going back home.
Now that the Exiled has been bested, Sonic takes off his wristband and ends the threat of chaos forever, disbanding the Omens and saving the day yet again.
I will never forget you. Remember?
Hey, Eggman, I have to ask.
What?
Remember when you said you tried to use the emeralds to travel back in time? What did you want to change?
Well, even someone like me has some regrets in life, Sonic. But let's leave that story for another time.
It's explained after the completion of the main story in the extras that the energy that binds both Sonic's world and the human world together is still theorized to remain unbroken. Oh, and by the way, you remember how I mentioned a reward for getting all 65 red rings? Yeah, well what you get is a final unsent message from Chris throwing back to Sonic where he references the Exile and explains how he feels fine, despite being called in critical condition by the doctors in the hospital he just escaped. He talks about feeling sleepy before he passes out on the keyboard, dying. Man, some fucking reward, am I right? Real talk, reading this message was genuinely sad. In the final post-credits, we see that the end of Chaos did not exempt the Master Emerald, and so Knuckles goes on to live his own life, free of duty, which explains why he is never on Angel Island in any of the 2010 stories. We also see that GUN officially shuts down, which also explains why they're nowhere around in newer stories, even when Eggman took over the entire road. Tails receives tickets to Eggman's new safe amusement park, which, as explained in the extras, is his way of showing he's now fully reformed and up to no misdeeds. This is of course setting up the events of Colors, which I greatly appreciate, even if it doesn't make too much sense considering Eggman was shocked to see Sonic and Tails at the theme park since they had to sneak into it. And we end with one last shot of Sonic honoring Chris Thorndike's grave before he hits the road once more. That was the story of Sonic Omens. Yeah, I will be the first to admit that it's messy. Really messy. There's a fair share of things that don't make too much sense, details that weren't fleshed out enough, and slight contradictions in the source material. But despite its many issues, I still love the story of Omens. It's just so damn imaginative and creative. The many influences it pulls from other Sonic media all pay off. There's enough originality and emotion to truly take the whole thing seriously, and the fact that I just spent the last 28 or so minutes discussing the story of a fan game this in depth is crazy. The story writer, Alexander Zarkov, clearly didn't want to settle for a by-the-numbers narrative and wanted to tell a special, impactful story. And I commend him for succeeding in making the story of Omens one I certainly won't forget anytime soon. I think it's safe to say that I like this game. Seriously, this is an official game in all but name, and I genuinely cannot believe that it exists. But with the entire game covered, we can finally start talking about what is unfortunately the main subject of conversation surrounding this game, the dumb drama. If you bring up Omens to any Sonic fan, they'll immediately trash talk the game on instinct, and you're probably wondering why. What unforgivable sins were committed by the dev team to warrant such a huge stain on Omens' reputation? Well, if you're expecting something exciting, you're in for some disappointment. The biggest drama this game was involved with is the situation surrounding Owlbow Studios' Patreon. As many of you know, Sega is completely fine with fan games, so much as no profit is made out of them. Well, as a reward for becoming a Patreon member of Owlbow Studio, you'd receive access to a beta for Sonic Omens while the game was being developed. People did not like this one bit, and this is what started the entire never-ending drama this game received. And look, I can understand why people were upset. If Sega were to find out about this Patreon thing, then they'd probably ban the creation of fan games period, jeopardizing hundreds of passionate creations. But look, call me ignorant or whatever, I see nothing wrong with this ethically. Games are expensive to make, and this Patreon was made to not just fund the development of Omens, but also future projects this dev team wanted to make. So I see nothing wrong with adding a harmless incentive to encourage future patrons. Where I really draw the line concerning the drama is everyone seemingly ignoring the fact that Sega has already looked into the development of Omens and everything surrounding it, and have already given the devs their approval. No, Sonic Omens is not endangering all fan games by existing. Everything has been sorted out, and this is no longer a valid reason to claim the Omens devs are bad people. What is a valid reason, or at least was initially, is the whole Maria ordeal. When Episode 7 first released, Maria Robotnik's model had something written on her undergarments. The text placed there said, "Bad girl." Maria Robotnik is 12 years old. That is a huge yikes, and understandably, Owlbow Studio had some explaining to do. Thankfully, they did just that, and it turns out that Maria model was outsourced to someone else, and this person, believe it or not, did not do this with bad intentions. It turns out this person grew up with undergarments that had this bad girl label, which was a type of clothing brand, and she added it in thinking this would be a cute Easter egg. I don't know how she did not anticipate this obviously being misinterpreted, but the bad girl text is fortunately removed in the update. So no, the devs are not predators, guys. Calm down. Now, what other unspeakable atrocities did this dev team commit? That's it. Yeah, no, aside from some smaller stuff, that's basically all of the major drama. Apparently, the original voice actor for Sonic got dropped because he needed time to buy a new mic, but I don't find this troubling because there could have been some scheduling conflicts or behind the scenes conversations we don't know about. Oh, and people claim that the track for Area 99 uses stolen music from Cars 2 the video game, which is easily the funniest attempt I've seen to slam the game so far. The two tracks sound similar but aren't the exact same in the slightest. There was a doc that came out about Owlbow Studio that the community ate up and used to justify their hate for Omens, but if you actually read through it, it's full of a bunch of nothing information and easily disputed claims. If you want a video that better explains all of this, watch the one uploaded by the Sonic Show that will be linked in the description, so just go check that out. But real quick, I want to express how much I hate the Sonic fandom. I have never seen anything receive as much forced hate as this one fan project, and it's an issue. Mostly because of how gung-ho and fast this community is to demonize someone over dumb reasoning and bad faith arguments. This is the first in a long cycle because there are plenty of Sonic creators who got ran off Twitter or even just social media in general because of this community trying to witch hunt a new target over some dumb petty drama that's easily disputed. I don't know if it's because the Sonic community is young or inherently toxic, but its vitriol to certain creators when they challenge anything relating to the brand is absolutely abhorrent, and I submitted this community as probably one of the worst I've ever been in any online space. It's genuinely frustrating. In an ideal world, the release of Omens would have shaken the community for an entirely different reason. The clear ambition, size, and scope of this project deserves better, and I feel really bad that all of that hard work these devs put into Omens will go unrecognized because of an unjustified hate train. I don't know what drove you to watch a 1-hour video of a Sonic fan freaking out over a fan game, but you take one thing away from this, do your research. Actually access things with an open mind and engage in more nuanced discussions. The world isn't black and white, and neither is one person. The hate Omens got is disgusting. Until this day, you'll see people calling this game utter trash because that's the opinion they've adopted from their favorite YouTuber, and it's depressing. Don't let anyone tell you you can't enjoy Omens. That applies to anything you have a strong passion for. Just be kind and respect others. Well, we've reached the end. I love Sonic Omens. The amount of passion, talent, and endless creativity that went into this game is mind-blowing. Its presentation is immaculate, its gameplay is fun, the level design is amazing, the story is fun and imaginative. This game is one of the best Sonic experiences I've ever had. It's not a perfect Sonic game, nor a perfect game for that matter, but it's my perfect Sonic game. Everything I want out of the series is here. A high-stakes, emotional, epic story with loads of genuine world building, open levels of high-speed platforming action, an OST that I could listen to for hours, beautiful art direction. If this production had the budget and manpower of a AAA studio, this would easily, without a doubt in my mind, be my favorite Sonic game of all time. And none of that is even mentioning this is a fan-made free-to-play project. I cannot fathom just how much passion and dedication went into this experience, and it's one I'll cherish for many years to come. If you have a PC that can run Omens, the link to this game will be in the description of this video. Download it and give it a fair shake. Odds are you won't be disappointed. We do not deserve a game like Sonic Omens. Alesky Bolt Dimitrov deserves to be proud of what he made, and I'm grateful I got the chance to experience it and share it with you guys. If you're new to this channel, please consider subscribing, that would really help out, and be sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this video. Thank you so much for making it to the end and not instantly disliking and clicking off, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Peace out.